Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back into the early 20th century, a time of clunky goggles, static-filled chalkboards, and dusty laboratories where no one quite knew what they were playing with. Picture this. You're standing in a cramped room lit by flickering lamps, surrounded by glass beakers, copper coils, and men in tweed suits arguing about invisible particles. The air smells like ozone and coffee, and the word radiation still sounds like something out of a Jules Verne novel. You probably won't survive this timeline, but not because of the bombs. It's more the unventilated labs and questionable hygiene. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's listening from the furthest corner of the world tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle alongside names you've probably heard in passing. Marie Curie, Ernest Rutherford, Niels Bohr. But instead of being floating busts in textbooks, here they are now, hunched over benches, poking at chunks of pitchblende and uranium ore. It's the early 1900s, and people are only just beginning to realize that atoms, those tiny, solid marbles from your high school diagrams, are actually chaotic universes waiting to explode. You trail Rutherford as he smashes alpha particles into thin gold foil and discovers, quite by accident, that atoms are mostly empty space. It's a quiet kind of revolution. Nothing blows up, no sparks, just a moment of disbelief, and the realization that something huge lies hidden in the core of everything, energy. But how to get it out? Meanwhile, Curie is busy glowing in the dark. Literally. Her notebooks are still radioactive today. She doesn't know the dangers. She just knows that radium gives off a strange, persistent light. It's beautiful. It's fatal. It's progress. You sit in on lectures where Bohr theorizes electrons jumping shells like over-caffeinated frogs. Everyone nods politely. No one really understands. But they feel the momentum building. These aren't just idle thoughts. They're clues to something potent, something that could be released with just the right spark. Still, it's all theory. No explosions. Yet, the mainstream fact here? In 1932, British physicist James Chadwick discovered the neutron, a neutral particle that, unlike its snobbish, positively charged cousin the proton, could slip into an atom's nucleus unnoticed. This little ghost would become the key to unlocking chain reactions. And the quirky bit? At one point, scientists genuinely believed they might have discovered element 85 in discarded dental X-ray plates. They were wrong. But that didn't stop headlines like, "New element found in tooth films." Because if you can't trust your molars, what can you trust? By the mid-1930s, the idea of splitting atoms starts moving from fringe to front page. It sounds insane, like splitting a bowling ball with a feather. But then Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann in Nazi Germany managed to do it. You lean in as they bombard uranium with neutrons and poof, get barium. That's not supposed to happen. Unless the atom split. Historians still argue whether Hahn fully grasped what he'd done, or whether it was Lise Meitner and her nephew Otto Frisch, calculating in Swedish exile, who first correctly interpreted it as nuclear fission. You overhear frantic letters, scribbled equations, and stunned disbelief. Atoms can split, and when they do, they release energy. A lot of it. You can almost hear the gears turning. Not just in science, but in politics, too. Because as the 1930s creep toward war, everyone's suddenly paying attention to uranium. This isn't just curiosity anymore. It's potential for power, for destruction, for reshaping history. Somewhere in a university basement, a quiet graduate student mutters, "If only we could control the reaction," and promptly sets a metal table on fire. You back away slowly. Outside the labs, the world is simmering. Hitler is rising, Borders are tightening, refugees are fleeing with hastily packed suitcases, and more than a few revolutionary ideas tucked under their coats. Europe is losing its best minds to fascism, and America doesn't yet realize the intellectual gold that's drifting toward its shores. One professor jokes, "We may end up building the next great invention from cafe napkins and chalk dust." Another replies, "Only if the cafes survive." You end this chapter standing in a doorway, watching smoke curl from a half-melted lab bench and wondering if humanity has just stumbled on its Prometheus moment. Fire stolen from the gods. But with far fewer safety protocols, you're now hunched beside a cluttered desk in a cramped apartment somewhere in Belgium, where Einstein is scribbling on a sheet of paper that may as well be written in alien language. Symbols, slashes, an equals sign, a contre faux MC2. You stare at it, trying to act like it makes sense. Don't worry, it doesn't. Not really. But it's the equation that quietly, awkwardly, explains how a chunk of ordinary matter can contain unimaginable energy. The idea is simple in theory. If mass and energy are the same thing, then a small bit of matter, a grape, a paperclip, a slightly disappointing muffin, could release a ridiculous amount of energy if converted completely. You raise an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. Einstein himself didn't think about bombs at first. His interest was theoretical, quiet, peaceful. But as you flip through his notes, sip his badly made coffee, and listen to his violin practice in the next room, it hits you. This equation is the philosophical backbone of the atomic bomb. It's the whisper behind every future detonation. You shift scenes to a classroom, this time at Columbia University, where the equation becomes part of larger, messier conversations. Lecturers pace back and forth with chalk-stained jackets, explaining mass defect, binding energy, and why certain atoms are more tense than others, like overachieving siblings ready to explode if you poke them. The mainstream fact: E-5 MC2 unlocked the theoretical foundation for the atomic bomb. It told scientists that inside matter was hidden energy. The next question was, how do you get it out? The quirky tidbit? In early discussions about atomic energy, one overly enthusiastic scientist proposed powering cars with tiny atomic engines. Imagine pulling into a gas station and asking for a micro-reactor top-off. Historians still chuckle and wince. You now drift through quiet hallways at universities across Europe. Men and women, many Jewish, many fleeing, are realizing that theory has become urgent. A group of Hungarian physicists jokingly call themselves the Martians, since their ideas seem otherworldly to their peers. Among them is Leo Szilard, who walks with a nervous energy that makes you feel like you're always a few seconds behind him. Szilard is obsessed with the idea of a nuclear chain reaction. You trail him across London in 1933 as he steps off a curb, mutters something about neutrons, and bam! The thought hits him like a cab nearly did. If you bombard certain atoms with neutrons, they split and release more neutrons. Those go on to split more atoms. A chain reaction, not just one pop, but a whole symphony of fission. You follow Szilard into years of hand-wringing, theorizing, and persuasive letter writing. Because there's a problem. In theory, this chain reaction is possible. But it needs the right fuel, uranium-235 or plutonium-239. Both are rare. Both are hard to purify. Both could change everything. And here's where it gets messy. Historians still argue whether scientists at this stage realized the scale of destruction they were imagining. Some saw it as a potential power source, electricity without coal. Others whispered about weapons. Most just wanted funding, a better lab, and fewer people standing too close to the radium samples. One minor debate, at the time, was whether to focus on uranium or plutonium. Uranium-235 made up only 0.7% of natural uranium and required extensive enrichment. Plutonium could be made in reactors, but was new, poorly understood, and incredibly toxic. Some joked that you'd get poisoned just thinking about it. They weren't entirely wrong. You shuffle beside committees, overhear lectures, witness panicked debates. It's all still academic. No governments have bitten yet. No one's cut $1 billion check. But the storm clouds are building. And as 1938 ends, something shifts. You're in Berlin now. It's cold. Papers flutter. A lab technician checks a result that doesn't make sense. Otto Hahn's experiment has accidentally split an atom. A uranium nucleus absorbs a neutron and shatters into 2 lighter elements, barium, krypton, and releases energy. They don't call it a bomb yet. They don't even call it fission. They just stare. A door has opened, and no one's sure whether it leads to power, destruction, or both. You wander past headlines that don't quite understand the significance. German scientists make breakthrough in atom studies. You roll your eyes. No one really gets it yet, except for a few physicists scribbling equations in cafes, wondering if the planet just took a sharp turn. You sit beside Frisch and Meitner as they calculate how much energy a single fission reaction would release. It's tiny. But multiply it by a few billion atoms, you start sweating just thinking about it. Which, incidentally, they did too. You're back with Szilard. He's reading these results, pacing, muttering. He writes to Einstein. He writes to Roosevelt. He writes to anyone who will listen. This can be a bomb, he says. This will be a bomb if Germany gets there first. You feel the clock ticking? The discovery is now out in the world. Scientists everywhere are catching up. A secret race has begun, though most of the runners don't know they've started. You end this chapter on the edge of a lecture hall. A young student whispers to a friend, "If this works, we'll change the world." His friend shrugs and says, "Or end it." You find yourself standing beside a chalkboard covered in frantic scribbles. Not elegant formulas, more like the result of someone doing math while panicking. Welcome to 1939, where science is no longer a quiet pursuit, but a matter of wartime urgency. The atom has been split. Now, everyone's whispering about what happens if that process could be made to happen again, and again, and again. You're at Columbia University, in a backroom office stuffed with filing cabinets, coffee cups, and far too many overworked physicists. In one corner, Enrico Fermi is arguing with Szilard, again, about neutron moderation. You try not to look like you don't know what that means. Something about slowing neutrons down, using graphite or heavy water, so they can split more atoms more effectively. Slower is better, apparently. It's like giving the neutrons more time to aim. Fermi is calm. Szilard is twitchy. One wants precision, the other urgency. You lean over a cluttered desk where they're drafting the theoretical blueprints for the first sustained nuclear chain reaction. But they need uranium, and money, and a whole lot of government cooperation, which isn't easy when Washington still thinks atomic energy sounds like science fiction. The mainstream fact? In 1941, the UPAD government formed the Office of Scientific Research and Development, OSRD, which would eventually oversee the Manhattan Project. Before that, though, it was just dozens of frantic phone calls, handwritten notes, and professors trying to get military officials to take them seriously. And the quirky tidbit? At one point, the military sent a group of Army engineers to sit in on a physics seminar to determine if this atom bomb stuff had any real potential. They left completely confused, but approved more funding anyway. Because, better safe than nuked. You drift with the scientists from campus to campus, lugging sensitive uranium samples in the backs of taxis. Some carry test tubes in briefcases. Others ship materials mislabeled as machine parts, just to get past nosy customs officers. The line between experiment and espionage is already getting blurry. You pass through the metallurgical laboratory at the University of Chicago, where you pause beside a strange, layered structure. Blocks of graphite stacked like oversized Lego bricks. This is CP-1, the world's first nuclear reactor, being assembled in a squash court under Stagg Field. No joke. The first man-made nuclear chain reaction will occur below the bleachers of a football stadium. You can practically hear the popcorn popping upstairs. Historians still argue whether this particular setup was recklessly brilliant or just reckless. No containment structure, no shielding, just a control rod, a pile of graphite, and a room full of very nervous scientists. You watch as Fermi lowers the control rods, inch by inch. The Geiger counter starts ticking faster. A hush falls. Then, sustained reaction. Controlled nuclear energy. It's December 2nd, 1942. A group of men shake hands quietly, sign a bottle of Chianti, and celebrate the moment humanity unlocked the ability to self-destruct with math. You chuckle, but also shiver. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, German scientists under Heisenberg are working on their own nuclear project, but their progress is, fortunately, slow. Miscalculations, resource shortages, and a few overly cautious decisions keep them behind. Still, Allied spies are nervous. You follow secret cables, bugged phone lines, and coded letters. The race is on. Everyone's losing sleep. Back in the U.S., funding has finally begun to pour in. It's no longer just a handful of physicists trying to rig something in a basement. This is now a national effort. Names like Groves and Bush, Vannevar Bush, not the presidential ones, begin to appear in memos. The military is interested? Very interested. You shadow a meeting between scientists and government brass. The scientists want time, safety, maybe some updated lab equipment. The military wants results. The words mass production come up. The mood sours. At one point, an army official quips, "If you boys can figure this out by Christmas, we'll wrap it up and drop it on Hitler's lap." No one laughs. You're invited into an unlikely alliance. Theoretical physicists, experimental chemists, military engineers, and bureaucrats, all crammed together in conference rooms trying to decide whether it's more urgent to isolate uranium-235 or breed plutonium-239 in reactors. Each path is wildly difficult and insanely expensive. Spoiler alert, they try both. By now, the word gadget has entered the vocabulary. It's what they call the theoretical bomb, because calling it the end-of-the-world device just didn't look good on paperwork. You peer over drafts that describe explosive lenses, neutron initiators, and implosion mechanics. It's starting to sound less like a physics problem and more like a monster movie. In the break rooms, scientists play poker. On chalkboards, they calculate how many kilotons of TNT their bomb might equal. One physicist muses. "What if we ignite the atmosphere?" Another responds. "Well, then we'll know." You end this chapter standing beside a row of filing cabinets marked "Top Secret." Somewhere nearby, someone mutters, "This thing could change the world." Someone else replies, "Let's just hope we're the ones who change it first." You're walking down a long, echoing hallway in Washington. See shoes tapping nervously on polished floors. It's 1939, and the letter in your hand is folded, sealed, and stamped with one of the most important scientific names in the world, Albert Einstein. But it wasn't his idea. That anxious figure beside you? That's Leo Szilard again, physicist, refugee, and now reluctant lobbyist. He wrote the letter, warning President Franklin D. Roosevelt about Germany's interest in uranium. He had Einstein sign it, because, let's be honest, Einstein gets meetings. You're here to deliver it. And no, you don't feel ready. The letter is short, but terrifying. It explains that recent discoveries in nuclear physics could lead to the creation of extremely powerful bombs. It urges the United States to start its own program. Fast. Roosevelt reads it, nods, and makes one of those vague presidential remarks like, "Well, we can't let the Germans do it first." You'd like something firmer, a policy, a plan. But instead, a few weeks later, a committee is formed, the Advisory Committee on Uranium. It sounds like something that meets once a month over bad coffee, but it's the flicker of what will become the most ambitious scientific project in human history. The mainstream fact here? That Einstein-Szilard letter directly led to U.S. government investment in atomic research. A cautious trickle of funding turned into a flood, and then a tidal wave once the war kicked into full gear. And the fringe fact? Szilard, ever the oddball genius, once tried to patent the nuclear chain reaction, as in, he wanted royalties. Imagine billing world governments for every fission detonation. One mushroom cloud, that'll be $12.99. You now follow a stream of acronyms and code names. The Uranium Committee becomes the S1 Committee. Meetings become more secret. Reports are classified. Labs begin sprouting up in odd places. And then, in 1942, it's time for something bigger. You're in a stiff-backed chair in a War Department briefing room, across from a hard-nosed general with a name that sounds like gravel. Leslie Groves. He's just finished overseeing the construction of the Pentagon, and now he's handed a much weirder project. Build a bomb, spare no expense, tell no one. Groves moves fast. His style isn't subtle, more like controlled bulldozer. You follow him from one classified site to another. Barking orders, assigning code names, stamping top secret on everything that doesn't move. He hires Oppenheimer to run the scientific side, and suddenly, you've got a pair that will go down in legend, the brash general and the poetic physicist. What could go wrong? They call the project Manhattan Engineer District, to make it sound boring and hide it in plain sight. Later, it becomes simply the Manhattan Project. You feel the air get heavier. Historians still argue whether Groves chose Oppenheimer for his brilliance, or because he was politically convenient. Oppie wasn't the most obvious choice. He'd never won a Nobel, and he was surrounded by rumors of leftist sympathies. But Groves saw something in him. Maybe ambition, maybe clarity, maybe just the ability to herd dozens of eccentric physicists into one desert lab. You now hitch a ride to the first of many strange, remote construction sites. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, nestled in hills and fog. It looks like any old town, until you realize it's not on any map. You drift through rows of identical houses, cafeterias, and massive buildings with no windows. What's going on inside? Uranium enrichment? Machines the size of battleships hum with calutrons and gaseous diffusion systems. Thousands of workers operate them, most without any idea what they're making. You ask one technician what they think the purpose is. Maybe it's radar, they shrug. Or artificial rubber? You nod. Let them sleep easy. Further west, in Hanford, Washington, entire reactors are being constructed to breed plutonium. You stand in the concrete shell of the B reactor, watching workers pour molten metal and secure fuel rods the size of tree trunks. Radiation meters start ticking. So does the timeline. Then, it's off to Los Alamos. New Mexico, where you feel the mood shift. Everything's more intense here. You arrive via a dusty, winding road into a high desert plateau. There's barbed wire, guard towers, and teenagers riding horses. The old boys' school has been turned into a secret lab town, and everyone from Nobel laureates to 19-year-old typists now lives under surveillance. You trail Oppenheimer through the labs, where Nobel winners argue over sandwiches, and chalkboards get wiped 3 times a day for security. They're building the unbuildable, designing from scratch, a device that has never existed. No margin for error, no time to waste. There are whispers of a test. Not yet, but coming. Meanwhile, you drift through memos, diagrams, and calculations. Half of them seem impossible. The other half? just terrifyingly real. You wrap up this section on a porch in Los Alamos as a group of physicists watch a desert sunset, exhausted and aware that what they're doing could kill millions, or end the war, or both. One mutters, "This place feels like we're living in a science fiction novel." Another replies, "Let's just hope it doesn't end like one." You step out into the dry heat of the New Mexico desert, the kind that clings to your skin and whispers secrets through the scrubby brush. Welcome to Los Alamos, officially just a military post, unofficially the beating heart of the Manhattan Project. Around you, barbed wire fences snake across the hills. Soldiers patrol on horseback, and somewhere, a Nobel Prize winner is chasing a chicken through a vegetable garden. It's a strange town. Brilliant minds, armed guards, and too many secrets stuffed into too few rooms. You wander through the halls of the main tech area, where blackboards are crammed with equations only 3 people in the world can understand. And all of them are here. Oppenheimer, tall and haunted-looking, moves from group to group like a conductor without a baton. He's quoting the Bhagavad Gita one moment and scolding someone for misplacing plutonium the next. Everyone here calls it The Hill. It's a town built for one purpose: design, build, and test an atomic bomb before the Germans can. You feel the tension crackle in the air like static. Everyone's working towards something they hope never to see used. The mainstream fact here? Los Alamos officially opened in early 1943 and became the secret hub where theoretical physics met explosive engineering. Over 6,000 people lived and worked in isolation, building a weapon none of them could publicly admit existed. The quirky tidbit? Scientists at Los Alamos formed a baseball team called the Los Alamos Comets. Their games were partially a cover to keep people entertained and less likely to ask, say, "Why is all the sugar locked in the high-security vault?" You tag along to morning meetings where breakfast consists of black coffee and ethical dread. The discussions toggle between explosive lenses and how to handle theoretical chain reactions that might accidentally ignite the entire atmosphere. It's a lot before 9/11. The labs are crawling with acronyms. There's the Thin Man, Fat Man, Little Boy, code names for bomb designs, not employees. You watch as engineers test high-explosive detonators that must compress plutonium into a supercritical state. If they're even slightly off, it won't explode, it'll just fizzle, which is a cute word for something that could still vaporize a city block. Historians still argue whether the implosion design for Fat Man was chosen too early, rushed into existence by sheer pressure. It was vastly more complicated than the uranium bomb. You need symmetrical explosions, shaped charges, neutron initiators, and timing down to the microsecond. One wire out of place? No mushroom cloud, just $1 billion dud. Meanwhile, uranium enrichment is happening back east, in those humming Oak Ridge facilities. But everyone knows the uranium bomb is the backup plan. The real gamble is plutonium. You sit in on a poker game one night. The stakes aren't high, just cigarettes and sandwiches. But the players? Some of the most brilliant minds alive. They talk shop between hands. Neutron reflectors, tamper designs, whether the gadget will detonate at all. One leans back and says, "We're not just playing with fire. We're building the match." The conversations get darker the longer you stay. Someone jokes about naming the bomb Oppenheimer's Folly. Another says, "Or Victory's Price." No one laughs too hard. Security is suffocating. You're followed everywhere by a man in a uniform who somehow knows your shoe size. Letters are read, phone calls monitored. Children of scientists attend a makeshift school, half education, half surveillance tool. Even inside the compound, no one ever knows everything. You overhear someone mention the Trinity test, still months away, but already looming. A full-scale detonation. Out in the Jornada del Muerto Desert Basin. Fitting name, Journey of the Dead Man. They're working on a tower, a steel structure to suspend the gadget for the test. Some whisper, "What if it doesn't go off?" Others whisper, "What if it's too powerful?" Everyone whispers something. One day, the lab runs a silent drill. Evacuation protocols, emergency shielding, code phrases like "time of flight" and "dragon is waking." It's like a play where no one gets to see the script. You watch a technician drop a small canister. Everyone freezes. It's not plutonium, just coffee. Nervous laughter? Still, the Geiger counter gets checked. Twice. You tag along as the test team experiments with high-speed photography. They're trying to capture a bomb explosion frame by frame. The camera setup costs more than some countries' annual budgets, all for a picture that might last a microsecond. Historians still debate whether Oppenheimer truly believed they were saving lives by building the bomb, or whether he just wanted to see if it could be done. In truth, he may not have known himself. Most nights, he walks the perimeter alone, cigarette glowing in the dark. You close out this chapter standing in the cool desert wind, looking toward the Trinity site. A steel tower rises in the distance. Birds avoid it. So does everyone else. You think of Prometheus again, and wonder, not whether the gods will punish us, but whether we'll punish ourselves. The sun is high over the New Mexico desert, and you're sweating before breakfast. But that's nothing compared to the heat coming off the mines at Los Alamos. The Gadget, the first prototype of a nuclear bomb, is no longer just theory. It's wires and uranium, trigger mechanisms and implosion lenses, lined up on a workbench like a macabre IKEA set. And yet, between all this tension, there's a strange normalcy. You hear it in the bounce of a baseball on dirt. Every evening, some of the top physicists in the world play softball, crack open warm beers, and argue whether the electromagnetic method of uranium separation is better than gaseous diffusion. You know, normal sports talk. The mainstream fact here? By mid-1944, Los Alamos had moved from theory to construction. Engineers and physicists were building real components, real bomb casings, and real detonators. Every device had to be tested. Timing circuits, high-speed switches, shaped charges. Because if just one failed, the bomb might not go off. Or worse, go off at the wrong time. The quirky bit? The security was so tight that each bomb part was developed separately, in different buildings, by teams who didn't know what the other parts did. It was like building Frankenstein one organ at a time, with no one sure what the monster would look like until it stood up and screamed. You walk into a lab where physicist Raymer Schreiber is showing off explosive lens testing. The idea is to compress a sphere of plutonium with an implosion so symmetrical, so even. It's like squeezing a balloon with 1,000 fingers at once. Except if they get it wrong, it'll either fizzle or prematurely detonate in their faces. You lean in as the physicists conduct dry run implosions using conventional explosives, just to test timing. There are misfires, there are loud bangs, there are a lot of broken windows. Historians still argue whether the implosion mechanism was too risky to pursue. After all, the uranium bomb design, Little Boy, didn't need implosion. It used a gun-type assembly, slamming one piece of uranium into another to create supercritical mass. Simpler, cruder, but only doable because uranium-235, the stuff it required, was insanely hard to get in quantity. Plutonium was more available, but it had to be imploded. So, they had no choice. Somewhere in the midst of this, a young scientist walks into Oppenheimer's office holding calculations. His face is pale. "There's a possibility," he says, "that we might ignite the nitrogen in Earth's atmosphere." Oppenheimer stares. "What's the chance?" The reply, "Less than 1%. Oppie just nods. "Let's go ahead then." You'd like to laugh, but you can't. You duck into another building, where scientists are building the bomb's detonator system. It needs to trigger dozens of explosive charges within microseconds of each other. No modern circuits, no computers, just copper wires, radio pulses, and the hope that everything doesn't come out lopsided. Meanwhile, Groves stalks around like a general with a clipboard, worrying about logistics. Can they get enough high explosives on time? Is the isolation secure enough? Will the weather cooperate for a test? The scientists worry about math. Groves worries about everything else. You attend a briefing where the final assembly process is described, not just technical, but psychological. Do not drop the plutonium core, someone warns, completely seriously. You wonder how many times that had to happen before it became a warning. Later, you follow the story of Louis Slotin, a brash Canadian physicist nicknamed the Chief Armorer of the Bomb. He demonstrates criticality tests using two halves of a plutonium core, nicknamed the Demon Core, manually lowered into position using a screwdriver. No shielding, no margin for error. One slip, and radiation would fill the room faster than you can say, whoops. Spoiler, a slip does happen, but not yet. You now walk through the dormitories, where scientists scribble equations in their sleep. There are babies being born, couples getting married, and mail censored so thoroughly that one man only receives envelopes with every single word blacked out. You imagine opening that and thinking, yep, Mom's doing fine. You sit in on another lecture. This one's serious. The possibility of sabotage, the possibility of test failure, the possibility of the bomb being ready and no longer needed. Germany is weakening. There's a chance they'll surrender before the gadget is ready. So, what then? You listen as Oppenheimer considers that very question aloud. If the bomb is no longer necessary to end the war, he says, do we still have the right to use it? Do we have the right not to? No one answers. You pass through a lab where workers are preparing for the Trinity test. The bomb, still just called the gadget, is being pieced together. Some parts are hand-delivered in unmarked boxes. Others are flown in at night. It's treated like both a sacred object and a high-voltage blender. In the evenings, scientists gather around radios, listening to war reports. D-Day has passed. The Germans are retreating. But Japan? Japan is digging in. Casualties are mounting. No surrender in sight. The pressure mounts. And so does the silence. You end this section beside a long wooden crate, marked explosives. It's headed for a place called Jornada del Muerto, the journey of the dead man. You run your fingers over the label. One day soon, someone will push a button, and that crate will become a sunrise no one asked for. The desert is still. Morning hasn't yet arrived, and the Jornada del Muerto basin, the journey of the dead man, sits in uneasy silence. You feel like you're standing on the edge of time itself. Somewhere nearby, the gadget waits. Not in theory, not on a chalkboard, but suspended atop a 100-foot steel tower, surrounded by a mess of cables, instruments, and human worry. It's July 16th, 1945. You hear murmurs in the pre-dawn darkness. Field tents rustle, radios crackle, cigarettes flare. Scientists, soldiers, technicians, they're all waiting. Some chew gum, some pray, some crack jokes about the name Gadget, as if saying it casually will make it less terrifying. The mainstream fact: this is the Trinity test, the world's first detonation of a nuclear device. At 5:29 FM, the Manhattan Project will stop being a scientific experiment and become a blinding, world-changing event. The quirky tidbit? To prepare for the flash, some observers wore welder's goggles. Others smeared their faces with suntan lotion, thinking it might help. Edward Teller, ever the over-preparer, offered everyone sunscreen and then looked directly at the blast anyway, through sunglasses, from behind a car windshield. You imagine the lab notes just said, confidence, medium. You're crouched beside a bunker, huddled in a trench miles away from ground zero, nearby. Oppenheimer watches silently. Some laugh nervously. Some clutch notebooks. One physicist mutters, "This better not be a dud." Historians still argue whether the final pretest calculations were accurate. Some believed the gadget might fail. Others, only half joking, worried it could ignite the atmosphere. When asked what would happen if it did, someone dryly replied, "Well, the test will be self-canceling." Then the countdown begins. 10, 9. You feel your heartbeat in your ears. 8, 7. There's a hawk circling overhead, unaware it's about to witness the end of the pre-atomic world. 6, 5. The silence feels thick, unnatural. 4, 3, 2, 1. You don't see the explosion first. You feel it. A wave of heat washes over you. Intense, sudden, unmistakably unnatural. Then the light comes, blinding and white, turning the desert floor to glass and the night sky to a second. Roaring dawn. You instinctively throw your hand up, even though your eyes are closed. For a moment, the world is lit as if by a million camera flashes. Then comes the sound, arriving like an angry god clearing its throat. A low, rolling boom that cracks the sky and rattles your bones. The earth shakes beneath your boots. When you open your eyes, a massive mushroom cloud rises into the sky. Pink, orange, black, boiling upward like a genie you can't put back in the bottle. Oppenheimer says nothing at first. Then, quietly, almost to himself, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." He's quoting the Bhagavad Gita, because of course he is. But no one corrects him. No one speaks. You watch as silence slowly falls again over the desert. The fireball fades. The scientists begin to blink and breathe. Some cheer, some cry. One man slaps another on the back and says, "It worked." Another mutters, "What have we done?" A message is radioed to Washington using the agreed-upon code, "Operated this morning. Diagnosis not yet complete, but results seem satisfactory and already exceed expectations." That's how you tell the president you've just torn open the fabric of reality. Later that day, soldiers and technicians sift through the wreckage. The steel tower is gone, vaporized. The sand beneath it has fused into green, glassy debris. They name it Trinitite. You pick up a piece, it's warm. Back at Los Alamos, word spreads quickly. Some drink to celebrate. Others sit in silence. Oppenheimer barely speaks. General Groves is practical as ever. He starts making arrangements for transport. There's still a war on, after all. You listen in on one of the post-test reports. The blast was equivalent to about 20,000 tons of TNT. That's more explosive force than all the bombs dropped during World War I, combined. Someone brings up a horrifying thought. If one bomb did this, what happens when you drop it on a city? No one answers. Historians still debate the psychological toll of that day. Some scientists left the Manhattan Project shortly afterward. Others threw themselves more deeply into their work, convinced it would end the war and save lives. You can sense the emotional fracture, the quiet rift between science and conscience. That night, you sit alone at the Trinity site. Long after the dust has settled, the stars are bright again. The desert is quiet, but the silence feels different now. Like the earth is holding its breath. You glance towards the horizon, where the mushroom cloud once bloomed. The memory glows in your mind. Radioactive and unforgettable. The test is over, but the real story is just beginning. You return to Los Alamos as a different version of yourself. A few days ago, the atomic bomb was a theory, an equation, a blackboard scrawl buried beneath layers of maybes. Now, it's something else. Something hot and real. Something you've seen burn the desert air and shatter the dawn. The lab feels smaller now. Busier. Hushed. A strange energy crackles through the corridors. Part pride, part dread. In one office, Leo Szilard scribbles furiously on a yellow pad. He's drafting a petition, urging the president not to use the bomb on civilians. Szilard, who helped conceive the chain reaction, now fears what he's helped create. Others agree with him, others don't. You watch as the lab divides itself, not out loud, but in stares and silences. Szilard's petition never reaches Truman in time. In Washington, decisions are being made with rapid efficiency. Military targets are evaluated. Hiroshima, Kokura, Nagasaki. Officials weigh not just the physical impact of each bomb, but the psychological one. They speak of shock value, of surrender. They speak of ending the war, and while they speak, you are shipped to Tinian Island in the Pacific, along with the pieces of a bomb codenamed Little Boy. The work is quiet, clinical. You inspect the uranium core, knowing full well what it can do. On August 6, 1945, you stand near the runway at North Field and watch as the Enola Gay, a B-29 superfortress, roars into the sky. Its pilot, Colonel Paul Tibbets, is calm, focused. He's been told to expect resistance. There will be none. You pace the tarmac as the hours drag on. Then the radio buzzes. Code words. Results clear-cut. You learn that Little Boy detonated 1,900 feet above Hiroshima. In an instant, a city is erased. 70,000 people die within seconds. Tens of thousands more will die in the coming days. Weeks, years, from burns, from radiation, from silence. Photographs come in later. Flattened buildings, bodies turned to shadows on stone, a city that looks as if a god had dragged a finger through it. The scientists back at Los Alamos react in different ways. Some cheer, some weep. One just says, "My God." 3 days later, it happens again. This time in Nagasaki. The bomb is Fat Man, a plutonium device like the one tested at Trinity. The city was not the first choice. Kokura was, but smoke and cloud cover saved it. Barely. A cruel twist of fate. And then, silence! On August 15th, Japan surrenders. Emperor Hirohito addresses the nation for the first time. His voice is faint, distant, crackling through the radio as if even the gods find the words hard to say. You think back to the desert, to the moment the fireball rose into the sky, and you realize that light didn't just end a war. It began something else entirely. In the days that follow, the word atomic becomes part of everyday life. Atomic diplomacy, atomic energy, atomic age. You read newspapers that call it the greatest scientific achievement in history. You wonder if that's true. One afternoon, you overhear General Groves talking with a group of officials. He says, "From now on, we'll need to prepare for a world where more than one nation has this power." You feel a chill creep up your spine. Later, you walk through the remnants of the Los Alamos lab. The chalkboards are smudged, the offices half empty. The war is over, and many of the scientists are heading back to universities, to families, to lives paused for 3 years. Others stay behind, pulled deeper into the work, fusion, hydrogen bombs, delivery systems, strategy. You understand now that this project, this moment, this flame you helped ignite, it won't go out, not for generations. You sit one evening beneath a pinon tree, alone with your thoughts and your silence. The stars overhead are calm and old. They burned before humanity, and they'll burn long after. Somewhere behind those stars, the math still holds true. Emkunaunum. But down here, the meaning of that equation has changed. What once belonged to theory now belongs to history. And you were there when the world split open. The war has ended, but peace feels strangely hollow. You return to civilian life, though the term no longer fits you. You walk through the halls of a university where once you were just a graduate student. but the classroom seems smaller now. The problems on the chalkboard feel quaint. Students ask questions you no longer have the heart to answer, simply. Some of your old colleagues join you here. They lecture on theoretical physics and quantum mechanics. Occasionally, a bold student asks about the bomb. There's a pause, just long enough for everyone to realize that the question changes everything. Because you can't talk about neutrons and decay rates and critical mass without seeing it again. The sky torn open above Hiroshima. The light that turned men into shadows. The silence after. One day, you're invited to speak at a public forum. It's billed as the responsibility of science in the atomic age. You stand at a podium in a packed auditorium, the lights hot on your face, and you try to speak about ethics and discovery, about caution and the future, but your words tangle. You realize you're not there to provide answers. You're there to remind them of the weight. In Washington, the Atomic Energy Commission replaces the military's control over nuclear research. There are promises of transparency, of oversight. But you know how deeply the impulse to weaponize runs. The Cold War is stirring. The Soviets detonate their own atomic bomb in 1949, just 4 years after Hiroshima. You weren't surprised. Neither was Oppenheimer. He visits you one evening, thinner than you remember him, his voice lower. You walk together beneath the trees, speaking of the past only in fragments. He tells you about a hearing, his security clearance revoked, accusations, politics, regret. You ask him whether he would do it all again. He doesn't answer. In the years that follow, the bombs grow stronger. The hydrogen bomb is tested in the Pacific, so powerful that it vaporizes an island and leaves a crater visible from space. You see the photos. You feel the old weight settle on your shoulders once more. But the world isn't listening. There are fallout shelters being built in suburban backyards. School children are taught to duck under desks. Nations speak of mutually assured destruction as if it's logic, not madness. And yet, not all is lost. A new generation begins to rise. Scientists, teachers, poets, children who do not remember Hiroshima, but who carry the echo of its fire in their bones. They ask different questions, not just can we, but should we? Not just what can science do, but what should it mean? You find yourself drawn to these voices. You speak to students at conferences, in classrooms, in hushed, curious corners of libraries. You tell them the story, not as a hero, not as a villain, but as someone who was there, someone who made a choice, someone who carries it still. And one night, years later, you're sitting by a lake. The air is cool, the water still, the stars bright and silent above you. You think of the ones you worked with, some gone, some distant, all changed. You think of the desert, the flash, the ash, the silence. You think of the moment when time itself seemed to stop. And you breathe, because history remembers the blast. But you remember the silence that followed. The world didn't end that day, but it learned how it could, and you were there when that door opened. Now, all you can do is hold the memory, and hope the future listens. Years pass. The world reshapes itself around the bomb, never quite the same again. Nations rise and fall under the shadow of nuclear fear. Treaties are signed, broken, renegotiated. Deterrence becomes the uneasy cornerstone of peace. You watch it all like someone adrift in time, rooted in a moment the rest of the world wants to forget. Or worse, normalize. You age. There are honors, medals, lectures, honorary degrees. People call you a pioneer, a visionary, a father of modern physics. They speak your name with reverence. But in quiet moments, you wonder if the reverence masks unease, if they see the glint of fire behind your legacy. You publish a memoir, you write not to exonerate yourself, but to remember, clearly, carefully. You recount the calculations, the desert winds, the debates, the silence after the test. You write about the first time you saw the flash, and the nights you couldn't sleep because you saw it again behind your eyes. The book is read, cited, forgotten, rediscovered. That's how memory works in a world rushing forward. Eventually, your hands grow unsteady. Equations take longer. Your voice, once commanding in lecture halls, grows thin. But students still come. Some seek wisdom. Some seek absolution. Some just want to hear what it felt like to hold the fate of the world inside a formula. You tell them the truth, that it felt necessary. And afterward, unbearable. One winter morning, you sit by the window in your small home. Snow is falling. The radio murmurs about new weapons, satellites, lasers in orbit. You close your eyes, listening to the rhythm of a world you once helped nudge off its axis. You remember a single grain of sand in the desert, turned to glass. You remember laughter in a lab, and men who wanted to change the world before they understood what that meant. You remember a man, tired, brilliant, haunted, whispering words from the Bhagavad Gita beneath a sky still shivering from the blast. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. But you also remember something else. You remember the faces of people who tried to make it right after. The protests, the marches, the scientists who refused the next job, the students who asked harder questions, the mothers who wept at meetings of the United Nations, the treaties. Fragile, but real. You remember that the future isn't written in stone or fire or mushroom clouds. It's written in choices. You made yours. The world made theirs. And now, as your time wanes, you hope, quietly, fiercely, that those who come next will choose better. Outside your window, the snow keeps falling. You rest your hand on a notebook, blank pages waiting for someone new, and slowly, gently, you exhale. Not with certainty, but with hope. The world turns, and you sleep. You sit in a quiet classroom. The war is over. The victors have returned home, and the bombs have long since fallen. But the echoes remain. Outside, the world is rebuilding. But inside the minds of scholars and soldiers, something else is under reconstruction. Morality. The chalk squeaks slowly on the board. A professor with weary eyes draws the outline of a mushroom cloud. Around you, the students do not speak. They only listen. The silence stretched thin like paper. You sip from a chipped porcelain mug, bitter coffee, too hot. Across the table, someone says it was necessary. Another counters. But was it right? In smoky conference rooms, military men talk in flat tones. Casual phrases like maximum impact and minimal cost. The bomb becomes a number, a line in a ledger, a page in a report. But beneath those pages lies the haunting truth that something irreversible has entered the world. You find yourself in those meetings, watching, listening. The ethical debris falls as silently as ash. Some say it ended the war quickly, saved more lives than it took. Others call it a crime, dressed in the uniform of victory. No one agrees. And maybe they never will. But the crater left behind, it isn't just in Hiroshima. It's in the heart of human conscience. A scorched reminder that power without pause becomes peril. You close your eyes. Somewhere, the quiet is deep and dark and filled with the weight of what can never be undone. You drift through dim alleyways where the rain never stops falling. It taps gently on your umbrella, on the cobblestones, on the edges of long coats and upturned collars. Somewhere nearby, a telephone clicks. A line is tapped. A whisper becomes a weapon. It's the late 1940s now, and the world is no longer just split by borders, but by shadows, east and west. Allies once, adversaries now. You walk between them, silent, as voices drop in volume and eyes grow suspicious. You pass by nondescript apartments, their windows glowing dim orange. Inside, scientists sit quietly, poring over diagrams that should have been locked in vaults halfway around the world. Names are never spoken out loud. Code names, perhaps, or none at all. In London, in Los Alamos, in Moscow, secrets slip through cracks like steam. Some are carried in briefcases, some on microfilm hidden in hollow coins. Some are memorized, word for word, formula for formula. You follow a man whose real name no one remembers. He blends into crowds, never rushes, never lingers. He hands off nothing. He merely walks. But behind him, nations realign, weapons are built, and the monopoly of destruction is broken. The Soviets build their bomb faster than anyone expected, not through genius alone, though they had that, too, but through the siphoning of silence, the theft of science. A second mushroom cloud, this time imagined, rises in the minds of the West. You watch leaders tense, trust collapses, diplomats speak in circles, and the age of espionage begins, not just in war, but in the wake of it. A world split not only by walls and weapons, but by whispers. It's the 1950s now. You find yourself in a tidy classroom, pale sunlight filtering through tall windows. A bell rings softly, and the children stand, then kneel, tucking their heads under their desks, hands clasped over necks, eyes shut tight. It's a drill, just a drill. The teacher's voice is calm, practiced, almost cheerful. Duck and cover. You do as instructed, though the desk is flimsy, the threat unimaginable. Above, the ceiling tiles hum with fluorescent lights. Outside, the trees rustle like nothing's wrong. In the suburbs, you follow a father down the stairs into his freshly built fallout shelter. The walls are lined with canned beans, water jugs, and books, novels, Bibles, crossword puzzles. A radio hums, tuned to static. He checks a list, just in case. It's quiet down here. Still, but not peaceful. You walk into living rooms where TV screens flicker with public service cartoons. A turtle in a helmet teaches survival with a smile. His shell will save him. Yours is a thin wooden desk. Across the country, families dig into the earth. They build not from hope, but from fear. The bomb is now a background presence. In playgrounds, in television, in schoolyards and kitchens. You move through neighborhoods where sirens are tested once a week, just in case. A generation grows up knowing exactly where to hide, but never truly why. The Cold War is not a war of soldiers and trenches, but of tension, constant, invisible, humming in the wires, sitting on the air like dust. You sit beneath your desk, in the silence that follows the siren, waiting, practicing, pretending the world could end quietly. You drift into a decade of escalation. The arms race is no longer a sprint, but a deafening march. Nations don't just build bombs anymore. They build bigger bombs, faster missiles, submarines with shadows longer than city blocks. The numbers swell. First 100, then 1,000, then enough warheads to end the world not once, but many times over. You stand at a missile test site, the desert wind hot on your face. The countdown begins, slow and steady. Somewhere in the distance, a siren cries out like a bird startled from its nest. Then, the flash. The ground bucks like a startled animal. The cloud rises again, broader now, more confident, its stem swallowing sky and horizon alike. The hydrogen bomb, a creature of fusion, not fission, louder, brighter, capable of vaporizing cities in seconds. And it is no longer just America and the Soviet Union. The club of nuclear nations expands. Britain, France, China. One by one, they step into the shadow of the mushroom. You find yourself in a submarine, submerged in silence, carrying firepower enough to erase continents. The men on board speak softly, their routines practiced, sterile, detached. Above the water, the world turns. In October 1962, the silence grows sharp. You hover above Cuba, missiles on trucks, ships en route, leaders pacing in oval rooms. You feel the world hold its breath. A whisper here, a wiretap there, and then a pause, a step back, but no relief. You sit in control rooms lit by blinking lights, staffed by fingers hovering over launch keys. You hear words like mutual assured destruction and second strike capacity. Logic twisted into knots of fear. A single misstep, a wrong reading, a radar glitch, and the world tips off its axis. But still it spins. Somehow, you drift now through a quieter world, not peaceful, not safe, but quieter. The Cold War ends, but the weapons remain. Siloed, silent, tended like sleeping dragons. You walk through abandoned missile bases, grass pushing through concrete cracks, rust blooms on steel doors. A keypad blinks red, still alert, still listening. Somewhere, keys still exist. Somewhere, codes still sleep. In museums, children peer at bomb casings and Geiger counters. They press buttons to hear ghostly sirens, unaware of how loud the real ones were. You see fingers press glass, eyes wide, minds young. The past seems impossible, and yet it lingers. The threat no longer shouts. It whispers. You float through policy rooms, where deterrence is still debated in careful language, posture, readiness, escalation control. Suits argue softly over slides and charts, the stakes too enormous to speak plainly. In fiction, the bomb becomes metaphor. In songs, it's a chord beneath the lyrics. In dreams, it's the sudden flash behind closed eyelids. Even in peace, the shadow lingers. You sit with scientists, older now, faces etched with regrets and rationalizations. Some still say it was necessary. Others say it was madness in a lab coat. You step back into the present, a world of rogue threats and loose materials, of diplomacy on one side and ambition on the other. The mushroom cloud no longer dominates headlines, but its ghost flickers behind every geopolitical tension. You take a breath, the sky is quiet. The missile silos are closed, but the atoms still sleep, humming softly in their shells, waiting, just in case.